we're going to just kind of discuss some of the things that are on the plate in New Mexico. Thanks for this idea. I think it was kind of an idea that you came up with, and we're happy to have you
Well,
as we maybe butt heads here a little bit
well,
from time to time.
I think most of the time we agree on a lot of things, and other times we butt heads about things. And so, Jeff Barry, your general manager, and I came from the entertainment business or the media business, and I thought it would be good. We've been pushing outside since the campaign. We've been pushing on topics and policies and issues, and I thought it would be interesting that we sit together and discuss ideas and listen to not only our Facebook Live, but also here on the radio. And we did these things called Turnaround Tuesdays during the campaign, and actually did live town halls and talked about topics. So thank you for having us, and I look forward to the next 13 weeks talking about issues for New Mexico.
All right, Turnaround Tuesdays, obviously, what we'll call this as well. It's New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. And so here's the funny thing about this, and you have experienced this as well. I run the risk with a fairly conservative Republican audience of why are you having a Democrat in there talking about, and then you have run into the kind of the same stuff, right?
Oh my God, when people found out on our social media and some of our followers, some of the Democrats have turned on me or have attacked me on social media. And I was like, wait a minute. During the campaign, both Lujan Grisham and myself, we talked about how it's important to reach across party lines and talk about issues and solve the issues together, because we're not going to solve them fighting. And actually, research shows 65% of New Mexican voters, are frustrated with both parties and are frustrated with the inner fighting between both parties. So New Mexico Democrats for Democracy and myself, we got together after the election. They had a following of about 33. We're now up to about 36,000 followers between our voters and our followers on social media. We're being followed right now between 60 and 100,000 people on social media across the state that are going to vote. And one of the things we heard after the election is, Jeff, we loved your platform. We loved your honesty. Don't go away. Don't go anywhere. Keep involved. And so we felt like it was important to use social media and our platform to push both candidates to issues that we need to discuss before this election, because we've talked about it, Stig, 50th and everything. We really have to kind of get focused on the issues that are going to solve New Mexico problems. And our goal is to make sure that our candidates up and down the ballot, not just the governor's race, but up and down the ballot, that we're going to push topics and issues that 65% of New Mexicans want to see our candidates discuss and talk about.
All right, I want to talk about your meeting with Steve Pearce, because obviously as a Democrat running for governor, he could have been your opponent had you been able to win. And here you are meeting with him, and this is another thing that set off your fellow Democrats.
That we we got a little buzzsaw it last week. And let me clarify something. Again, we talked about talking to both candidates. We sat down with Congresswoman Lujan Grisham. She was a little dismissive with us about some of our platform and some of the things that we talked about during the campaign, and I'm sure there's some bitterness there because of the primary, because I ran against her. But when I reached out to the Pearce campaign, they were very interested in sitting in and visiting. So we sat and visited and talked about issues and topics and policies that we're gonna talk about. Now, on the campaign, you heard me talk many times. It was our leading conversation piece, how our state sits on $24 billion, and we invested outside the state to grow those funds, which is fantastic. And we talked about investing back into New Mexico. Now, that's one of the things both candidates are now talking about. So we're happy about that. We think they need to get a little bit more aggressive. And so last Monday, what you're talking about is Congressman Pearce actually had a roundtable and invited business leaders from around the state. I thought it was just Albuquerque, but there were business leaders from around the state at the Greater Chamber of Commerce that morning to discuss specifically this. How can we invest $1 billion of our $24 billion back into the economy, back into New Mexico, back into small business? His campaign called me and said, would you and New Mexico Democrats for Democracy please show up, and would you be willing to talk about some of the issues, because we're listening to you, Jeff. So I went there as a private citizen to talk with business leaders, as I've done many times, and I made it very clear. He did say, do you mind if he's being very respectful, can I introduce a former gubernatorial candidate? And I made it very clear to the press that was there, and I made it very clear to the room and on social media, I am not endorsing Steve Pearce. I'm not endorsing the Republican agenda. But if I can influence both agendas for for the betterment of New Mexico, why wouldn't I be at that meeting? And then it actually wasn't the press or the GOP. It was actually a tracker from the Grisham campaign that took a picture because he introduced me and I got up and shook his hand and welcomed the room and said a few words. They took that picture, blasted it on social media, and I got attacked that I'm now a traitor of my own party. And I was like, if we can't sit down and talk to each other specifically during this campaign, how are we going to solve New Mexico's issues, whoever wins?
All right. One of the things that I am really struggling with, and that's doing a radio show, and I'm sure you run into the same thing as being a governor's candidate, is the parties now have become so divided that when you do a simple thing like that, you just show up to a forum. Now it's shocking front page, news. Where did we go wrong that we can't? Even if we don't agree, we don't have to sit here and say "Kumbaya, man. I love your policy." But where was it that we kind of became so far apart that we can't even talk to each other?
I've seen it coming, at least in New Mexico. I've seen it coming for the last 10, 15 years, and the divide of the parties. And it's all about influence of the parties and the established candidates and whose turn is it next. And that's what we're trying to stop. We're basically saying, look, I understand I lost. So, there's people out there saying you're a sore loser. Why don't you go away, Apodaca? And I probably would have, but we got so much positive response after the primary and what a great race and issues that we brought up. We just heard from so many supporters, this can't be over. You have to stay involved. So that's what we're trying to do. We're actually going up and down the ballot, meeting with Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians. Don't forget there are Libertarian candidates. Mm-hmm. And let's push an agenda that we feel is going to create jobs, better education, fix opiate addiction, topics that issues that we talked about. And that's what we're going to do for the next 13 weeks during this election, both every day on social media. And then I want to sit here and we can find middle ground, and then let's figure out where the candidates stand. So the audience, your audience and the Democratic audience, independents, Stig, the fastest growing party in the state of New Mexico, Independents. Mm-hmm. It's the fastest growing party. And 65% of them, or actually, when you look at the research, 65% of New Mexican voters are upset at both parties or have not declared a party, and so we want to make sure they have a voice. We want to make sure they have a voice, and that's what we're trying to do.
All right, so we're on Facebook Live right now, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy on Facebook, and of course you can call us here as well at 243-3333, or if you want to send in a question via the Facebook page, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. Jeff Apodaca is our in-studio guest. When we continue, we'll talk about the contentiousness of that race that he was involved in and, well, whether he thinks Democrats are going to come together when it comes to November. The Stig Show continues in 1 moment, or 1 minute. That would be 60 seconds on News Radio KKOB.
Bubba G, how's that traffic?
Hi, everybody on Facebook. Thanks for joining us today. It's about 5:16. Say hello to Stig. But join us, share it, invite your friends, and let's talk about some issues. Today's kind of an overall summary of what we're going to do for the next 13 weeks, and then we'll talk about the different issues that we're going to talk about. So again, thanks for joining us today. Share, invite your friends, and we look forward to talking to you guys over the next 45 minutes.
All right, Jeff Apodaca, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy, joining us here in studio, and I look forward to the next 13 weeks. Every Tuesday night, 5 p.m. To 6, we're going to just talk about some of the issues facing the state of New Mexico. You were involved in a pretty contentious debate. Are New Mexico Democrats going to be able to come together? Because this looks like a little bit of an effort to say, hey, MLG, we're not necessarily on the same page.
Well, I think part of it is I think we're on the same page on many issues. There's some other issues that we just think that need to be addressed, and so we're going to make sure that they're doing that across the board. And look, there has been both the Republican and Democrats have pushed a lot of people out of the party or disenfranchised people from the party, and so 27% of the people turned out to vote in the primary in a gubernatorial race. Now, we can bash Trump all day long, right? I'm not, you probably like Trump. I'm not the biggest fan of Trump. But my point is the President of the United States doesn't have that much influence on your day-to-day, what happens in the state of New Mexico. The number one person that does is the governor. And so we actually have a much larger turnout during a presidential year than a gubernatorial year, when it actually should be reversed. So our goal over the next 13 weeks is to make sure that our audience, both Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, Republicans, know where we stand and what we're going to push for issues and policies that we'll get into more details over the 13 weeks. But I do think that my goal is not to divide the Democratic Party. My goal is to bring the Democratic Party back together, represent all people within the party, and make sure that we're focused on New Mexicans and not about stepping stones or political careers or party affiliation.
All right. Jeff, here's the challenge. I think it's great to say, hey, we want to find common ground. I just don't know that anybody in either party is interested in doing that, or very few people in the parties are interested in doing that. Case in point, the blowback that you're getting just for engaging with Steve Pearce's campaign or this program.
Right. And Stig, and I agree with you, but keep in mind, you have a lot of Democrats. According to research,
absolutely.
you guys have a lot of Democrats and independents listening. So I think what I'm hoping to bring is 65%, research shows 65% of New Mexicans that are going to vote don't feel strong about either party, and they're frustrated. So we're hoping to bring that voice together and say, hey, let's look at the candidates and let's look at where they stand on each topic. And what's happened is there are now voters today that focus on one issue, one topic, when we have a lot of issues and topics in New Mexico we have to solve. So our goal is to start the debate, get the conversation going, and let your listeners, let our followers, we have 36,000 followers in New Mexico Democrats for Democracy, over 25,000 other people following us on social media. So that's about 50,000 people just on social media alone, that we just want to make sure that they're educated and we motivate people to go out and vote this election.
Would it be, and I got to get to a break here, but would it be easier for you to do that if you didn't have a D next to your name?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. And I hope we can change that. That's the goal. Hopefully you and I can actually change a lot of opinions and bring Republicans to the Democrats, bring Democrats to Republicans. And again, I'm not here to talk about let's vote for the Democratic Party, and I know that upsets my Democrat friends. I'm here to talk about let's elect the best people that have the best issues and solutions for New Mexico to make sure that we're doing the right job.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about that when we continue with Jeff Apodaca on News Radio KKOB.
New Mexico's talk leader, 94.5 FM and AM770 News Radio KKOB.
All right, Jeff Apodaca is here, former candidate for governor, state of New Mexico, and lost to Michelle Lujan Grisham in the primary in June of this year. You engaged with Steve Pearce. What do you like about Steve Pearce? What do you like, and where are you in lockstep with Michelle Lujan Grisham?
I think it's about sitting down with both candidates. I sat down with Grisham and really tried to push our top 10 issues and policies that we're going to talk about. And so was a little disappointed that she was a little dismissive on some of the issues. But again, she feels like she has her plan for New Mexico. We feel like we have our plan for New Mexico. But we just want to make sure there's open dialogue to make sure that we're pushing for all New Mexicans. When we met with Steve Pearce, we went up and down our issues, and he was very receptive and open. He knows for him to win, he has to reach across the aisle. But at the same time, we feel that if we can talk to our U.S. senators, congressional, gubernatorial, and down the ballot and push our issues across the board, we felt that the Pearce campaign was very open about talking to us about some of the issues. So that's what's happy about that. And as we talk about this, as weeks come on, we're going to come out and talk to you about how we talk to each candidate and where they stand.
Okay. I had a conversation with the Pearce campaign. This has been several weeks ago now, and one of the things that they really believe is that there's a large number of Democrats, especially in the northern part of the state, who have values that are very similar to Republican values. They're pro-life, they're pro-gun. Does she have a hard time with those folks?
I don't know. I mean, she did very well in the primary, sure. But I think in the general, it's going to be a different ball game. And again, when you start looking at the number one issues in New Mexico, it's jobs. It's jobs, it's crime, it's education, it's healthcare, it's opiate addiction. So we're going to push topics on that, right? We know there's a divide, and that's one of the biggest issues. Is we know there's a divide between pro-life and pro-choice. We know there's a divide sometimes between gun control and the Second Amendment, and we can discuss those all day long. But those don't affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis, and so we're going to make sure we're pushing those other issues throughout the campaign.
Jeff Apodaca joining us in studio. We'll get to your phone calls, Facebook questions as well. New Mexico Democrats for Democracy is the Facebook Live location right now. How's my hair look? No, I'm just.
I think it looks good.
You need to switch sides. That's your best side.
I used to be a TV guy, and that's why I'm on radio now. All right, continuing with Jeff Apodaca, former gubernatorial candidate, and New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. And I'm told now that we have the Facebook Live feed on our Facebook page as well, 94.5 FM AM770. Just type in on your Facebook page, News Radio KKOB. So New Mexico Democrats for Democracy or the News Radio KKOB Facebook page. All right, you got a question from your Facebook?
Well, no. One of the questions we got from Desiree was, how are we going to fix the mess in our state? Well, hopefully the next 13 weeks, Desiree, we can answer that for you. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Look, we know that jobs, crime, education, healthcare, opiate addiction, those are the top issues that we have. But one of the things, Stig, then we know we got 13 weeks, so we're going to discuss a bunch of different things. But one of the major factors we're talking about is how do we invest some of that $24 billion into our state? We're going to push for local preferences on state and federal contracts to New Mexico industries. We're going to talk about reform on the judicial system and our Senate and our prison system.
Hear, hear.
You know, we need to talk about. We're going to talk about, yes, some candidates don't want to talk about this. We're going to talk about government corruption. Some of the issues that we have in our state. Obviously, we need to talk about education. We're ranked 50th in education. We got to talk about how we can invest, and we'll probably have a debate about that. How we can reform, as we call it. And then look. Bottom line is, we're going to talk about pay scales in the state of New Mexico. How we're going to increase pay scales for our teachers and get better teachers here, get more doctors here. We also were pushing for every state employee gets a 3% raise every year. We're pushing both candidates. Neither candidate has agreed to it yet. They like the idea. But our state employees have not had a raise in over 14 years. And then one of the most topical conversations that we're going to have is energy policy. We have to talk about our oil and gas industry, whether you like it or not. We have to talk about fracking. We have to talk about investing into renewables. Now, we're going to be pushing a lot. In the campaign, I talked a lot about investing $1 billion into renewables. Today in the Albuquerque Journal, there's a whole article about ZIA and the transition system. I think it's important. And again, opportunities. And then we're going to push about value-added agriculture. And the most important thing we think about also is our veterans. We have to push better health care, better job opportunities, things like that. So those are the topics that we feel that we can solve a lot of issues in New Mexico that we want to get into details in the next 13 weeks to talk about. And our Facebook followers and your listeners will be teasing and talking about what we're going to talk about each week to come prepared about that.
All right. Let's get a phone call in before the break here. John, you're on News Radio KKOB with Jeff Apodaca.
Hi, gentlemen.
Go ahead.
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks very much for taking my call. You know, I'm 63 years old. I've seen plenty of division in between the parties and so forth throughout the years, and I have to say I've never seen it as bad as it is right now. I think that you're right. There are some issues, some key issues in this state that we have to overcome and bring the parties together to agree on. You know, one being crime, obviously, the other jobs, and I think the other is social welfare. Because if we don't create an incentive for people to get off of welfare and to get a job, you're never going to solve that problem.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yeah, John, thanks so much. And Sig, I agree. I mean, we and both candidates are talking about this, and we talked about poverty. We got backlashed a little bit because Congressman Luan Grisham rolled out her poverty issue stance a couple weeks ago. We just didn't think it went far enough for job opportunities. All
right. Jeff Apodaca in studio with us. We're on Facebook Live on News Radio KKOB and New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. And we're going to come back and take more of your phone calls as we continue. You can also get in a question on Facebook Live on New Mexico Democrats for Democracy as well. Stig Show continues on 94.5 FM and AM 770 News Radio KKOB. All right, continuing with Jeff Apodaca here in studio. We're going to be doing this for the next 13 weeks, 5 o'clock every Tuesday night as we count down to the election, and we're going to talk about some of the issues facing New Mexico. Democratic perspective, Republican, conservative perspective as well. Let's get back to phone calls, all right? Let's go to Mary. Mary, you're on with Stig and Jeff Apodaca. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, good afternoon. I am concerned when I keep hearing Democrats say that they're opposed to President Trump. It was just mentioned a while ago by Mr. Apodaca. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in this state and watched the Democrats tear it apart. We're 50th in education. Trump is finally bringing in jobs. Welfare is down. Hispanic unemployment numbers are great. And we still get this resistance when the Democrats do nothing. And I'm so sick of hearing them say this. It makes me crazy.
All right. Thank you, Mary. So here's a good example of, hyper-partisanship.
Right.
But I guess the question is can Democrats ever give Donald Trump credit for doing anything?
Again, there's that 20% on the Dem side, 20% on the Republican side. And Mary, let me apologize if you thought I had attacked Donald Trump. One of the things that we're going to push, one of the things that we talked about on the campaign, and Stig, you and I talked about at the very beginning, the President of the United States has very little to do with the day-to-day opportunities for New Mexicans. And so we're going to focus in on New Mexico issues. We're going to bring Democrats and Republicans together and talk about those specific issues. And so you're right, Mary. I think both parties need to come together and start talking. And Stig, you and I talked about it. A couple weeks down the road, I'd love to have Pearce and Grisham in this studio talking to each other about the issues and the topics. We have to start working together, together with New Mexico issues. Now, Mary, look, the economy's doing well all over the country, but not in New Mexico. Our unemployment is the second highest unemployment in the country. We're ranked 50th in job creation, 50th in education. Now, I'll tell you right now, our unemployment has gotten better by about a point in the last year. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it, it's construction jobs, a lot of them like at Facebook and some other construction that's come back, and then oil and gas. Oil and gas is really driving it. So those are great industries for us, and those are great industries, but we have to look at diversifying our economy and start working together, both Republicans and Democrats, and investing into New Mexico and solving those problems.
Angelica, you're on with Jeff Apodaca. Go ahead, Angelica.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. Jeff, why are you and your mom, Clara, actively campaigning for Steve Pearce, emailing and meeting with Democrats around the state, asking them to support Steve Pearce?
Well, Angelica...
Furthermore, Jeff, why are you still being so sexist towards Michelle?
Angelica, how am I being sexist towards Michelle? Look, I heard that in the primary campaign, and I just disagree with that. You have
that sounded like a plant, by the way.
Of course, they're called trolls, by the way, on social media.
Yeah.
But Angelica, look, I appreciate the call, but that's just wrong. I mean, bottom line is we sat here and talked about the issues, and it's amazing how I call out factual issues about a gubernatorial candidate, and all of a sudden I'm being sexist. Look, I mean, it's about who's going to be the best candidate, and I'm not going to worry about if it's a man or a woman. It's about the issues and the topics. Now, I don't know what email campaign she's talking about because we're not doing any email campaign, and my mother's definitely not doing anything. And so we're going to push topics and issues. But again, here's another example: is we're trying to reach out and work with all the candidates to push agendas that's going to help New Mexico, and I'm being turned on by some of and not all of them. There's a lot of Democrats that are happy that we're doing this because they know we have to work together.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ray, you're next with Jeff Apodaca. Go ahead, Ray.
Okay, how you doing, Scott? Let me pull over here so I can do this safely. We've talked a lot in the past, but one of the things that keeps coming out, and I keep thinking that the Democrats just don't get it because they are not listening at all. Show me one example where throwing money at public education has ever resulted in sorry about that. Turn the radio on. Where throwing money at public education has resulted in improved performance. We're still dead last. Mm. And for 88 years, New Mexico has been run by Democrats. Do a little bit of research. Go back on the keyboard in the Google thing and key it up for 1964. That's when it started in Michigan. And every single economically declining or downward spiraling state has been run by Democrats. Wake up.
All right. Thank you, Ray. So I guess the question is improving education.
Well, I think that's going to be. You want to talk about it?
Yeah.
At the end of the break?
Let's take a break here. Back in 1 minute. All right, we'll try to get in as many calls as we can for Jeff Apodaca before the top of the hour here. Paul, you're next. Hello, Paul.
Hi there, Stig. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, Jeff. I don't understand something. Every Democrat that I've ever talked to is like so hardcore on this renewable energy thing. I'm all for renewable energy, but right now it is so expensive to get for the equipment to put everything in place, and for the output. It's not cost effective. It's a terrible deal, and I think I just heard you say that $1 billion is what we want to spend on it. Well, it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Why does everybody get on board with that when it's not cost effective?
All right, thank you, Paul.
Okay, Paul, I disagree with you. And by the way, when I say invest $1 billion, I'm not talking about the state spending $1 billion. Paul, there's $1 trillion, according to the Wall Street Journal, of debt of capital out there looking to invest with us. So during the campaign, I met it with three different companies that are willing to come in and invest $1 billion on their own. So again, we got to look at different revenue streams. And I disagree with you because today, I would agree with Paul maybe 10, 15 years ago, but today between wind and solar, you can literally generate, build it out now and generate a kilowatt at about 6 to 11 cents. I mean, about 2 to 4 cents a kilowatt. And then that lowers our cost here, but also just like the ZIA power lines that we're talking about, and there are 14 states that our power lines run through. We can send new renewable energies and sell it wholesale, and again create a new revenue stream. So the costs have dropped dramatically. I think the state has $24 billion. We're investing in those type of industries around the country. Why not invest a little bit in here? We're not talking about spending. We're talking about investing, creating jobs, creating a return, and creating revenue streams for the state of New Mexico.
Yeah, I think solar has obviously a big future in New Mexico. I think solar is and solar costs have come down. The problem is that it takes fossil fuel energy to create solar panels. So we're never going to, and I don't think you're saying this either, but I don't think we're ever going to get away from the fossil fuel industry.
Today, 80% of the panels today are in China, coming from China. So they've lowered the cost there. Of course, the tariffs now are going to raise those costs a little bit, they say, but let's see what happens. But I think it's an opportunity for New Mexico. Paul, I know what you think, but the costs have dropped dramatically. There's new technology, and I can't say the company, but there's a new technology today that has actually been developed that is probably going to lower installation costs by 30-40%. A New Mexico-based company creating a new solar panel right here in Albuquerque. And my biggest concern is if we don't create an infrastructure and create investment opportunities for them, not spend money towards them, invest with them, keeping those companies here for opportunities.
Right,
see, look, Stig, we agree on something.
When you say invest with them, though, what are you talking about?
Well, the startups have to do first, second, and third round. So that's what we're talking about. Our $24 billion that we invest into other states, we invest into Wall Street. We're talking about just taking 5% of those dollars and invest them here in New Mexico. Biotechnology, cybersecurity, different solar energy, different technologies. I mean, there are technologies we're developing here about cleaning water and cleaning fracking waters. Those are New Mexico-based technologies that we're researching and developing here every day, and those companies continue to leave because we're not investing with them and bringing private capital with them.
All right, we're sitting on a ton of oil, though, too, so that's a good thing. Mike, you're next.
Yeah. Go ahead and Mr. Apodaca's on. I voted for him because he thinks business. I think we need tech schools. Okay, if you go to Massachusetts and see the tech schools that they have, high schools, it's amazing. They have equestrian, they have electricians, plumbers, everything you want, beauticians. And when you come out, you're licensed after 4 years of high school.
Yeah.
And this state is missing it big time because we have nobody trained for anything except college.
Right.
Well,
And Mike, thank you. I got to run here because I'm up against the end of the show. But I think you're on the same page.
We're on the same page, Mike, and Pearce and Grisham are both on the same page about moving more dollars into trade skills, pathways, and opportunities, and we'll talk more about that later.
All right, we will see you next week.
And follow us on Facebook at New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. We'll be posting our topics for next week. And Glenn, we're going to talk about veterans. We're going to talk about cannabis. We're going to talk about a lot of different things over the next 13 weeks. And let's solve some of the problems for New Mexico.
Bobby G.